All right, I've got 3 after, and as promised, I will start this meeting officially now. So welcome everybody to the October Culture Pilot webinar / workshop. The nice thing about this is that we have been meeting and working together through some of these issues as it relates to building a culture of conservation at our organizations, and what does that mean? And that is a big question for all of us, and that's why we're meeting and why we are making these more than just a meeting, but a workshop where everybody can participate and talk about what they're doing at their organization, what's working, what's not working, what was tried and what was learned. All of those are very valuable and helpful to us here. So we're wrapping up. We're coming, I wouldn't say we're wrapping up yet, but we're coming near the end of this year's series. And to that point, I'm going to share my screen for a minute or two here and just kind of bring everybody up to speed on where we're at in terms of looking forward. Today's question will be around diversity and inclusion, but looking forward to the last 2 meetings of the year. In November, we'll address what are the communications issues in culture building. And so that should be a very interesting conversation. And then in December, for those who aren't out on vacation or taking holiday or whatever, we can meet and talk about where do we want to go from here? What do we want this to look like eventually? And what kind of things do we want to accomplish going forward? This year, I think has really been exciting in terms of having these webinars and these forums to discuss culture issues with ourselves and with each other. And so the question is, what will be useful as we go forward? So that quick preview there. And with that, I will open it up. First of all, are there any general questions that anybody has about anything, or any general comments anybody wants to make before we get into today's discussion? If not, then we'll go ahead and jump in to today's discussion, which is going to be, and I'll share my screen once again, and then I'll put these questions in the chat. But this should be a lot of fun for us to talk about, because I know personally I have a lot of questions. I've been spending a lot of time this year in terms of getting trained for diversity and inclusion issues, and how does that look at our organization? What does it mean in terms of programs? What it means in terms of action? What does it mean in terms of our institution? What does it mean in terms of a culture of conservation? Why diversity and inclusion? Why is that so important? Maybe beyond, I'd love to, I hope our conversation can get beyond kind of those easy answers. Well, a diverse culture is good because we get a lot of ideas and we include people. Well, why is that good? Why are those things important? Why are they important specifically to conservation? So I'll share my screen real quick here so we have the questions up. And then Jeremy, as always, has once again volunteered that he'll moderate our discussion. And Stacia, thanks for being with us. I know you've got some things going on at home. So it's amazing that you're here with us. So please also feel free to jump in on this conversation as well. So there is today's discussion questions for us. I'll leave those up for a minute or two. And like I said, I'll eventually put them in the chat, and we can start our discussion today about why is diversity, equity, access, and inclusion important for a culture of conservation. And I chose those 4, by the way, because those come specifically from the AZA website in terms of the 4 that they address. I know there's things like justice sometimes is thrown in there as well. I did put in question 2. One of the things that I find very, personally very important is belonging, the difference between simply inclusion and belonging. And what does that look like? And how do you achieve that? So with that, Jeremy, take it away.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Jeff. This is gonna definitely be an easy one to answer for sure. But I'll start it off as easily as possibly. So how does DEI contribute to the conservation at your organization? I know this is going to be a tough one because not everyone's at that level, even with DEI now. It's a new thing. It's kind of the trend going there. So anything, even if it's a small little piece that may have been, a forward movement, we would love to hear that, because I think all of us are in the same boat how to do this. So these are two very, very broad and tough questions to answer. But I'm looking at Kristen already. Are you ready? You felt like Kristen from, I think, yeah, in Florida down there. Yes, I see your face. Yeah, you look like you really wanted to jump in and say, yes, I understand that issue. So.
Hi, everybody. Great to be with you today. I'm Kristen Saitaki. I'm the Director of Conservation Engagement and Learning at the Palm Beach Zoo. So it's a recent title change for me. And it's something that our zoo is really making a priority. And so for the first question, what we're trying to do is we're trying to engage staff in a culture of conservation. And I mentioned this on previous calls, but we've had a couple outings now where we're trying to immerse staff into nature, connecting them with nature, just like we hope to connect our guests in nature when they come and visit our zoo. And I feel like opening these opportunities up to all the staff at the zoo cross-departmentally. So whether you work in guest services, the maintenance department, you're a part of the wildlife care and conservation team, we all go out together. So I feel like having a diverse activities and engaging different cross-departmentally also can kind of reflect on our audience. Like segments of our staff represent different segments of our audience. So I feel like getting our whole team out there, our goal is that 100% of our staff participate in these activities that I'm planning by the end of our fiscal year, which is October 1st to September 30th. So it's been fun so far. We went kayaking and on a wild and scenic river. And so it was a really positive experience. We had diversity in departments attending, and we've never done anything like that before. So I feel like I'll have more to report in the upcoming months, but we are making it a priority, and it is part of the work day. It's designed to be that way. So we're excited about it. And I feel like it allows us to engage with different staff members who maybe we don't normally engage with, but I feel like it prioritizes for everybody the important work that we're doing, and that it doesn't matter what department you work in, that we're all connecting our guests to wildlife and wild places. So this is how we're starting with our staff.
That's great. Does your zoo have like a statement based off of diversity in any capacity, or how is that element being showcased? You have the access point, trying to get people to go to these work days here. But just curious, does your institution have something that they know that you are committed to, DEI stuff, and how that falls into the conservation work that you might be doing?
So we do have a committee. It was led by our former HR director. Our new HR director is on the call, but I'm not going to put her on the spot because she just started recently. It's Tara that you see.
Oh, come on, Tara, you can do it.
But it is something that is a priority for us, but I feel like because of some staffing changes, it's something like we're getting back to. So as far as an official statement, not yet. Unless
we do have an official statement.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. And the committee is starting back up again next week. And then we have an all staff meeting at the end of this month to redistribute the statement, to go through, and it's our idea statement. So we've rearranged the letters, and this is the opportunity. We've hired a lot of new staff in the last several months. So we're really just distributing this and re-engaging. As Kristen said, she's starting all of this with our staff engagement. So it's really really the beginnings for us to get that through the organization.
Certainly. Great. Well, thank you for speaking up, and very nice to meet you, Tara.
Nice
Welcome
to
to
meet
the
you
group.
too.
Does anyone else? I know, Stacia, you had your hand raised for a minute there. I wasn't sure if it's still up.
Well, yeah, I had a thought too. So I love that you were talking about how you're engaging your staff. And I was wondering, like, we've been doing strategic planning. We have specific, we're also doing our whole DEA and I work right now. In conjunction with that. So we also have a focus group that's made up of all different levels and different departments. And that was voluntary. Whoever wanted to sign up could participate. And we've engaged our board, we've engaged our, upper management levels, and then also staff to have input on our statement. But I was wondering too, since we're talking about conservation, how people have try to embed that into their strategic plans within like that framework of conservation, if they have a conservation section within their strategic plan. I know, Jeremy, you said something little, to even mention those. And I think one thing that seemed like something pretty simple for us, but we hadn't thought of until last year really, or actually applied to, was our investing and looking at ESG, and our finance director really embraced that. And we weren't sure what we were gonna, find, but we were saying, this is something especially tying to the social justice piece, because it's kind of a nice thing that checks a lot of boxes, because you can look at what you're doing for sustainability, what you're doing for conservation, but also how does the ESG covers, DEA and I things as well. And so our accountants were really kind of excited to look at that too. And we got a report back really quickly. And luckily, a lot of ours were already aligned with our beliefs and what we had, what our mission statements. But I think that one is something simple. And when we talk about embedding this within our culture, that is, I think that's a next level step. You're digging a little deeper. You're going beyond the scope of what, I think you think of, like what Jeff said, on the surface a little bit. And then we're looking opposite of internally. I mean, we're doing things internally, is re-looking at our community engagement and what we're doing with like our programming and things like that, and how we're engaging with the community surrounding our conservation work, but also combining that with our DEA and I goals, and really reevaluating where we are in our community, what we're offering, are we providing value, what are different organizations within our community looking for. So that's something else we're doing on the flip side of the staff engagement.
To that point, I'd really like to hear some more comments as it relates. What are you doing to engage? What are your different organizations doing to engage in the community? I often walk around the zoo and I look, and there seems to be an invisible group of people who visit the zoo, who it seems that we're not necessarily engaging with or making efforts to engage with. And I often wonder, what is it that we should be doing in terms of community outreach engagement with these different groups that exist in our community? And so I'm curious, who out there is doing something specifically? There's the bottom line. They always talk about when you're in the business world, they always say there's the bottom line of diversity and inclusion. And so if I were to look at it from that standpoint, I'd say there's a lot of people who aren't coming to the zoo that maybe have to ask the question, why aren't they coming to the zoo? And should we be reaching out to them because they're part of their community? So the answer, the obvious answer is yes, we should be. Yes, we should, and it will affect our bottom line. And that's great, good and great, but also what is it that we need to be as a zoo in terms of including community and having them on the ground in part of programs? So kind of a long-winded question, I know, and comment on that, but I'm really curious in what others are doing in terms of reaching out to the community. What kind of specific community groups are you reaching out to? Is it here in Salt Lake, we have an immigration center, for example. We have a Pride Center. We have a Hispanic chamber. We have a Pacific Islander population. Those are the Salt Lake City metro area, ones that just come to top of mind when I think of different groups that I've got to ask myself, are we reaching out to them and forming the kind of partnerships we need? Are they coming to the zoo? Are they a part of our experience here? So with that, I'll open it up for other comments.
I can add one. This is Andy McIntyre with John Ball Zoo in Grand Rapids. We did one of the conservation education programs for this year that was launched, was called Habitat Heroes, and one of the goals is our conservation starts locally and starts at home. So we do more than half of what we do in our Great Lakes region. And the other was really starting at home with literally the neighborhood associations directly adjacent to the zoo, and not starting, really focusing just on 3 of them. Working with 3 neighborhood associations specifically with the individuals that are part of that and live in those areas. And each of those have a little different representation as far as their demographics and who lives in those communities. And it really gave us, I think, a different connection with those particular groups that are literally our neighbors that I think we hadn't had in the past, and reached out to those audiences in a different way. And it also helps us understand a little bit more of what do we need to bring to the table in the future as we start to do this more often, as we expand to other neighborhood associations and areas.
Great, thank you. Chris, your hand is up.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Chris Norman, Akron Zoo. One of the things that we have done is to, first off, call out DAI as part of sort of across all of the aspects of the organization's business lines in our strategic mission, is we're looking at this levy period. So it's really upfront. We've designated one of our directors in external affairs to specifically focus on this area. And one of her initial efforts has been a community-wide survey. So we've hired a third party to facilitate this, both externally and internally, to really listen to what our neighbors are saying, what they would like to see the zoo do in regards to engagement, inclusion. And then as we're digesting this, that will help inform the areas of focus for this levy period. Internally, it's been a series of questions or interviews we just started with different populations identified among staff to really kind of get at some of the unconscious bias efforts that are there and some of the opportunities or bottlenecks that we're sensing. So it's been a really interesting initiative that she has started for us. As I say, it's as much of a listening phase right now, but it's very intentional for us because we think this is clearly something when we talk about conservation that we want to be intentional about. It's an area we can see certainly on the surface where we have a lot of room for growth, but it's been a pretty big lift just this year.
Great, thank you for sharing that. As always, too, we do have the resource library. Anything you should share today that might be helpful for any of us, please let us know. We can upload it to the resource library as well. And then Paula, your hand is up.
So I was just going to say one initiative. We have a few initiatives with the community, but one initiative in particular that's community-based and conservation-based that we started with our conservancy is called the CALL program, and it's I think we have 2 groups. We have summer camp programs, and so we bring in students from age, I think it's around 13, 14 up to about 17 into the zoo for a summer camp that's free. It's provided to them, so we try to encourage anybody from the underserved communities that surround the zoo to be able to come to this free camp, and it offers an opportunity to see the conservation programs that we do here. So they tour around much like the summer camps we would normally have. And then we also have another program where we take in students and we give them a paid internship. So they're with us for, I think, about 4 months, and they travel around and they do different job shadowing, and actually they participate in the job. And again, it's a paid position, and they're getting experience and, kind of an education in what it's like to do conservation work, but broadening their horizons and in that type of work. What we found was that with the underserved communities, it's really difficult for them to get into like most of the opportunities at zoos are volunteer based. And that's really difficult for them if they're in a situation where money isn't really fluid for them or available. So offering these paid internships and giving them that experience was kind of one of the initiatives that we started. But again, that's just one.
Great, thank you, Paula. Paula, would you mind talking more about the new Director of Indigenous Relations position that you may have has been announced recently?
Yeah, so that she actually just started very recently before the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And actually on that day, that's something else that we do, that we reach out to our First Nations communities and offer them the opportunity to come into the zoo, again, for free. And that director, I actually truthfully haven't met her yet. She's only just started. She's probably still trying to find her feet. I'm not sure if Diane's had the opportunity to meet her and understand a little bit more about what she's going to be doing in the next little bit. But yeah, that's a program that we're really excited and invested in moving forward and combining what we do now with traditional knowledge so that we can, have a more holistic approach to how we approach conservation. Again, Diane, I don't know if you've had a better chance to talk to her.
Hi, Paula. Hi, everyone. So no, I actually have a meeting with her next week because she's been, I guess others have been meeting with her. She's very, very new to this role, but we are leaning on her heavily. Again, for that Indigenous piece, we're working on an app. We're doing a phase 2 that really pulls in the Indigenous culture and, the tie-in with polar bears and just, again, climate change and how it's impacting the northern communities. So I have a meeting with her next week, so I'll get to know a little bit more about her and her role. So I apologize for not having any more information, but we are excited about this. I think it's amazing that we've done this, and it's going to provide amazing opportunities. So very excited.
Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think we're all very excited. I know it's the first of its kind in North America, so I think it's gonna be really unique to kind of hear those elements because that's directly tying in with all of our questions here. So we look forward to hearing more. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else have anything in terms of the community aspect or even the first question about conservation? If not, we could kind of move forward about the questions about what is the difference between inclusion and belonging, which is, I think, it's a huge piece for us here.
Jeremy, hi, this is Eric Beachman at Zoo New England. One thing I wanted to comment on with that topic is, we've tried things in the past, like internships in our field conservation department or other programs that are like our community relations people have tried. And those are targeted towards people in underserved communities, and they don't necessarily end up being as popular as we hope they would have been. People don't apply, frankly, and I haven't been involved in what our current program is like, but our outreach group is now doing, it has been for at least a year now, working on a co-design process with the community to actually figure out what it is that they would like and design programs with them, which I think is going to prove to be pretty critical, actually, and delivering on what our intentions are.
You're right, for sure. I think we're all of us face those same concerns there. Oh, 1 second. Sarah just posted in the chat. Sorry about that. It's a long one, Sarah.
Hey, yeah, sorry, my video is weird, but yeah, I just put a note in the chat. It was a little bit more about the previous question about kind of what we're doing. But yeah, if anybody has questions or wants to talk more about that, feel free to connect.
Do you have time to do a quick? Oh, go ahead.
So while you're digesting that, Eric, I just wanted to the co-design. I think what you mentioned there is really key. And I think in order to, what came to my mind in terms of co-design also is, in order to co-design something with someone, you also have to have a relationship. And so that's something I know that's always top of my mind is, have I put out the effort to build the relationship with the groups that I want to be working with. And unfortunately, you know, sometimes no, I have not. And so there's a lot of work still, you know, I mean, this is a journey for all of us, but I think some of the best advice I ever received about this journey for us is that start it. And if you mess up, apologize and keep going and figure out how to make it right, but to build those relationships. So I just wanted to pick up on that idea of co-design. I think is extremely important. And I think the key to it is that we build the relationships, because when we have those relationships and we're sincere about trying to increase the belonging, not just the inclusion, but the belonging of the different groups with us, there'll be some room and grace for messing up. But as long as we're sincere in what we're trying to accomplish, we'll also be able to move forward in these efforts.
I could try to see if there's materials that our group could share in the document library. But I know it has taken a lot of investment of time and meeting with communities, you know, meeting with community centers and community groups, churches, you know, different places of meeting across our communities just outside our gates, to actually just listen, you know, just listen and hear from them what it is that they need, what do they want, how do they see themselves being involved with the zoo, and of course through that our mission of conservation.
It's great. Yeah, thank you for looking at. Hopefully, we have some resources. I think all of us would find that very important and powerful. Thank you. Angela, your hand is up.
Hi, I'm sorry. This is Angela. I'm at the Denver Zoo. I'm the International Field Conservation Director. I think that this is a really important topic because I've been through a couple of institutions in recent years, and inclusion, I think we're getting there, but at that sense of belonging, I think is still an area of weakness that we don't, and it's not to anyone's fault, but just the engagement part isn't quite there yet. And I think to what Jeff said, I think, you know, building those relationships is really important. It may not be us in this room, but I think you have to find those key people who are well placed to actually engage with the communities that you want to engage with. And I'm just saying this coming from a slightly different background. And, you know, there are very kind of insular communities, and you have to find ways of communicating with them and kind of yeah, just having the commonalities in there to be able to engage. So I think that's something that we actually as a whole need to do better at, or look at other options.
Sure. Do you have any examples? Especially, you know, you've been to multiple institutions in there, and I just know that's important. And I was curious to be anything that's tangible that could be shared.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a Spanish-speaking staff here, and I think, you know, instead of you know, me going out there, it's actually, you know, they're going to be able to engage better, and people who know the cultures and people who, you know, and same with. We have a large Asian community here, and maybe this is an area that I would do better in. So just kind of finding those people and opportunities, and of course, you have the people have to be on board.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for sharing, for sure.
No problem.
Does anyone else have anything to share right now in the first two questions, at least? I know the sense of belonging is a huge piece that I think all of us have to really internalize, but also realize that, you know, we have to feel like we're feeling good in our own, you know, our own roles or positions and on the teams for us to then be able to filter to our communities and who we're trying to kind of reach in there as well. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just echo some of the earlier comments, but I know that, you know, just recently showing up, you know, by participating in some of the programs outside of the park, well, then you find out other opportunities, and that happened for us this past Labor Day parade, one of our underserved communities. The zoo's there. I was part of the organizing group, but then we found out about a park that they're installing in the neighborhood, and so we were able to show up then and help additional volunteer time just this past week. So again, it's just start that journey, as Jeff was saying, and show up. And I agree. It's, it can be clunky at times, but this is how we build relationships and find out other opportunities to be available and support.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing. There's a quiet group out there today. Chris is leading the path, which is fantastic. So, all righty. I guess so. Then we'll go to our third question for now. Again, we can all be very fluid with this. If anything else pops up, please let us know. But you know, what are some practical steps you've taken to address DEI within, I don't know, your institution, your own teams, departments? I know we've talked about, you know, listening and trying things. That's great. But is there anything else outside of that that could be really, you know, we can measure in some capacity?
So I'll maybe help prime the pump. So one very practical thing we did was we had our first Pride Zoo Brew this last year. Zoo had never done that before. Previous to that, we had just kind of employee pride recognition day the year before. Those were huge steps for our organization institutionally. We live in a very red, I live in a very red state, very conservative. And there's a lot of different feelings on a lot of different issues, as you can imagine. And so, but that was for us, and there was some missteps, you know, we stepped in, you know, some of the doo-doo in doing it. And we also learned and were able to build some pretty good relationships as a result of that, though, of just being willing to go and make this effort and to try it. Not perfect. We still have, I don't know what this coming year is going to look like in that area. Another thing that we've done as a practical matter is we started to celebrate Day of the Dead. And so this is going to be our second year where we actually have a specific zoo day around that cultural holiday. So those are just two things that we've done that we're, and I don't put those up as, you know, gosh, we were just completely successful, that we're working through. We're making the effort, we're working through it, and these are some of the things that we're doing at our zoo.
Great, thank you for sharing. I know oftentimes some of these taking the next steps feel like you have to go through a lot of red tape or uneasy to go through these because you're not sure where the zoo stands on there or aquarium stands in there. Anyone have any red tapes that's kind of causing some of these maybe not so much to jump into trying these things as you're trying to grow from here?
Doug, you've got your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
I didn't see that up there. There you go.
Sure. And if Chris, as I joined right in the middle of his comments, so if any of this got done before, I apologize, but I think it's different, assuming the question's different. For us, critical things that we did with staff surrounding DEAI was the creation of our Inclusion Advisory Council, which is as diverse as we can make it with the existing staff that we have. We have outside facilitation from experts in the DEAI field who facilitate the group, and they now support a direct line to the zoo's executive team, so that when we have an issue that arises, for example, we had in the past things that we did misstep in with a staff member wearing a BLM pin and having somebody at an event complain about that. Our response wasn't what it should have been. We also had a similar response when a partnership and a donation from Chick-fil-A was received, and was not the first time. It happened many times in years past, but wasn't as visible. And our internal LGBT community was very upset with that. Today, the process would be a bit different. So as we recognize something that comes up like this, we would send it to the Inclusion Advisory Council for guidance and then bring it back up to the executive team for further conversation. So that's been something that I think has worked really well since it began. And as far as really understanding organizationally, like I sit in a different chair. So the question that you asked, the way you asked it, like of red tape in the organization, where does the organization really sit? From the CEO chair, my question is, what does the staff believe about these things? Because it's much more about the current culture of the staff and their understanding around this work and what inclusion actually means. A lot of people seem to really understand what diversity means, but not really what inclusion means, because inclusion means to many people include other people like me, but don't include the people who I don't like. And that actually becomes a significant challenge then to bringing everyone together, because you need all sides to recognize that diversity is both visible and invisible, and even people you disagree with need to be at the table in order for us to truly gain that innovative and agile perspective that everyone is looking at by creating a diverse team. So we did deploy, and we don't yet have the results back yet, but staff group focus groups, so that we could actually have an outside facilitated conversation amongst different groups of people who make up our staff, so that we could have a better idea as to where each group sees the organization presently through the lens of DEAI, and what each group sees as the challenges on the next hill, so that we can then combine the vision of all those groups into a direction that the Inclusion Advisory Council can work with the executive team on. From a bureaucracy and red tape standpoint, for us, the biggest issue has been figuring out process that works for our organization. And I would imagine that's probably the biggest issue for everybody else, because every organization is different. You live in a different community, you have a different staff makeup, therefore different perspectives that may require adjustments in process. But the bottom line in the end is the DEAI efforts are all about teaching every human to be a good human to other humans. And it's kind of a uniting effort. But getting people to be willing to be open about where they disagree, so that we can all determine where we want to head, is the biggest challenge. And so that Akron doesn't take up too much of the call, me coming right after Chris, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I did that really quick. What is the makeup of that committee for the inclusion committee on there? Like, is it just full-time staff, part-time staff, volunteers?
It's all, anyone who is considered a part of our staff, either paid or unpaid, has the opportunity. None of them are voluntold, which is a key thing. Many of us get voluntold to be on committees because we want them to. None of them are voluntold. We have a system where people who are interested can actually apply. We just ask that they write a letter demonstrating why they would like to join the committee. We then have a review process with committee members in order to determine who else gets added. And we have the council and the auxiliary. So the council are the voting members on subject matter, and then the auxiliary gets all the training that the council gets, and they sit in the wings for when the term limits come up for the council, so that council members can bump down to auxiliary. Auxiliary members might be able to be elected to council, and those who want to join it for the first time would join in the auxiliary, so that we can actually take time to intentionally build everyone's competencies around DEAI. And all of our staff, tool-wise, go through the Intercultural Development Index, which the IDI, it actually spits out an individual DEI development plan for each individual employee, which they can then work with their supervisors or people in culture on. And it, as an organization, gives us an aggregate picture of where our staff is today and what kind of training we may get the best result from, so that you're not just bringing in low-level diversity training if in fact what you need is, you know, building deeper competencies around microaggressions, or deeper competencies around a particular culture or something like that. So that's how I'd answer you.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful. Anyone else want to add to that besides Akron, maybe? And if not Akron, keep going. Chris, anything else to share there? These are all been really wonderful discussion points here. trying to think anyone else out there. Whew. Did we hit our ceiling today, Jeff? I don't know.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic for sure. I want to just go back and maybe revisit this idea of diversity, inclusion in the conservation context. Why, and maybe it's been answered, but I don't know, why as a zoo should we be worried about or concerned about these issues? We've done hundreds of years, let me just be blunt, hundreds of years of conservation in one way. We can throw out words like colonialism and white supremacy, and I'll just throw those words right out there. And we've done it that way. So why all of a sudden now are we thinking it's so important that we look at this in a different way and we start addressing these issues of diversity and inclusion?
I think, and it's coming to light a lot more, but that social and environmental justice piece is getting recognized more and more in what needs to be added. Like I said, even this conversation has gone, which is great, because I love hearing about what everybody's doing, because I think we're all on our DEA and I journey as well. But, I think it tends to go back to the things that we've talked about a little bit today, but how is that related back to conservation more? And that social and environmental justice piece, I think, has not come up to the forefront until more recently in those ties. And I think there's a lot of statistics behind, underserved communities and how especially sustainability issues affect those communities a lot more than others. And so I think that's a big tie that zoos and aquariums can make a large impact on, because you're serving like a lot of people just spoke about, your neighbors, like a lot of the neighborhoods that surround your institutions. I know that's how ours is set up. And, historically, there's not as much tree cover. There's lots of vacant lots. There's flooding. A lot of, sometimes it's the waste management systems in those areas. And so I think there's a tie there that we're just starting to embark on that has a very strong conservation tie. So I'm interested to see how everybody's tackling some of that, because I do think that's the piece where we're going to align a lot of our education, community engagement programs, things like that. How are we tying those all together? Because I think for a while, some people were unsure how DEA and I kind of tied together with conservation, but it's becoming more and more clear. It's affected, across the board, I think, with lots of things, but I'm really interested to see, because I do feel like that's maybe a newer piece that a lot of our zoos and aquariums are embarking on right now.
Oh, yeah, thank you. How can you have conservation without sustainability? I loved how you mentioned that, Stacia, that, yeah, if we're truly talking about conservation, we are also truly talking about sustainability issues. And you can't have sustainability issues unless you start including every single human being who's a part of that issue. Catherine.
Hello, Catherine Shire from Edmonton Valley Zoo, a small zoo up in Canada. But however, we have an amazing, I'm really appreciating this conversation, because why is it important? It's because we're global. We're more global than we've ever been. And I think about our snow leopard and the work we've done around, the SSP, and our Nepali community in Edmonton is so strong. Like, why don't we have a Nepali day, a Sri Lankan day, and link it to all of our species? Because then you're getting those members in your community to talk to the members in their home communities that they're very still connected to. And so I'm just wrapping my mind around this, because I'm an ecologist by background and I'm not an expert in diversity and inclusion, but it's actually quite exciting to think about how conservation in our global world it gets back to those root causes. And if we can, through our community,
connect in with the communities of the places that we're trying to educate about. That's pretty powerful if we can just harness it.
Absolutely. You got me all jazzed up. Thank you, Catherine. We have a couple in the chat. So I know we never really talked about Sarah's, and then Stacia did some things in terms of celebrations in there. Good on you there, Stacia. That's awesome that you can do those things. And Doug, let's see if I can. Okay. Wow, we have a lot going on here. Read the conversation there. Yeah. So. Shelley, your hand raised. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of this, I see pieces of this that come back to the social science research agenda that was developed a couple of years ago in across several communities within our community. And I think part of why environmental justice, social justice, and why DEAI factor into conservation is the need for the systemic aspects related to conservation that I think people are aware, and perhaps there's an increasing urgency, recognition of the urgency that conservation is not a biological target and that it cannot be saved in isolation from some sort of a social context in which both people and wildlife can thrive. And so I feel like the DEAI aspects really tie into how are we building a system in which we can see this long-term sustainability or this thriving together aspect. And if we continue to think of it as just a biological target that only scientists can solve, then we are very unlikely to be able to sustain any short-term successes that we may be able to see. And I think as a result, it really is mission critical for us to be able to embrace this idea of how are we creating the systems in which we can see conservation be successful and people can be successful within that conservation context and conservation within the people context. So I think there's a really tight link with some of the social science research questions that we've articulated a couple through the agenda, but I think that many people are increasingly exploring.
Absolutely. Thank you. Catherine, you had your hand raised for a minute in the beginning there again. So you're good? Wonderful. There's quite a great communication link in the messages there. Angela, it's awesome that you're sending around local communities. That's really great on that piece. I think oftentimes, I think we forget that sometimes you gotta go local to really kind of go global at the same time. So wonderful. Does anyone have any other insight or stories or any maybe particular days you are including and celebrating at your institutions that might be helpful for other institutions as well? I know that Catherine, you mentioned why not do these days, those are good questions. Sometimes you don't think about it unless you try it from there. Nope.
So I'll bring up another interesting idea around this diversity and inclusion and the fact that we have to include everybody. Let's talk about zoo attendance and the relevancy of zoos, and let's go to the bottom line of our zoos seeing the same attendance that we've seen in the past. And there's a lot of different factors, I know, that contribute to that about whether people are coming to our zoos or not. And so it's not a simple answer, but I think that this is one of the things that we need to be looking at in terms of that as well. If for no other reason than the viability of our institutions and our relevancy to the communities we exist within. And so I think that that business case is also important to not gloss over. It shouldn't be I don't think it should be the most important thing that drives us. I think our mission should be what drives us, continues to drive us, and that of conservation. But I think this is also part of that equation in terms of zoo attendance and zoo relevancy. Anybody have a thought or a comment on that?
I agree. I think, we can't shy away from that. We are businesses. To be able to meet our missions, we need to be successful businesses. And so we can't shy away from the need to be successful and relevant, because if we can be successful and relevant, then we can meet our mission. And I think that our missions are inspiring. I want us to be able to meet them, and we can't do that without business. So I feel like we shouldn't don't be scared to say there's a business case for this, because that is what allows us to do the things that we feel so strongly about.
Yes, Shelley.
Yeah. Well, it looks like the conversation is winding down. And so one last thing, yeah.
Let me jump back to your first question when we were starting. You'd said that some people had questions about the survey, the conservation culture survey. So this is totally separate topic, so I don't want to cut off from there, but I do want to answer that. So many of you probably received a link to be able to share within your staff and your organizations to be able to do a conservation organizational survey of how affinity and toward that conservation part of your mission. And those are through a Survey Monkey that is housed at AZA. So if you want us to tell you how many people have responded, you need to email Jillian Canataro or me, but I will put Jillian's email in the chat. And she can tell you how many people have responded to date. And then she can also, when you would like to close that survey, let us know. She will close it and she will download and send you all of the data. So we worked with the Phoenix Zoo where they said, hey, we are going to roll out a couple more, keep it open another week because we're here. We're going to do another little prize or incentive or whatever it was to get a few more, but they could kind of track to see when had they met, how many they had wanted to get in there. Just keep in touch with Jillian and she'll be able to keep you in the loop on that.
All right, yeah, thank you, Shelley. I think what I'll do is a follow-up email to everybody as well, and just kind of go through that again for those who have wanted to use the survey or use the survey. I know I've got one group who is asking me that question, so thank you, Shelley, and I'll send that information out again to everybody. With that, anybody have any last comments? If not, go and do good. So, and go grab your pumpkin spice favorite dessert thing, whatever it is. It's the season. So, all right, we'll see you all. Have a great time.
Thank you all. Have a good one.